Hello, Eric.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Jürgen. How are you?
Hi, Salaboy. Hi, Eric.
Stuff.
Yo.
Let's wait a couple of minutes to see if someone else joins.
Okay. Probably Alois will join a little bit later, but he has another conflicting meeting.
No worries.
And he just wanted me to announce that he might join later. But yeah, he's involved on Slack, so we can also update him later on. But it's nice to meet you both. It's
cool. Same. Hopefully we can start like collaborating now. I think that so far we are just kind of like been trying to organize the work, and we are really pushing hard to get something up and running. So I think that in the following kind of like couple of weeks, it would be great if we can just create the most minimalistic thing with the vocabulary that we are trying to define, and then just iterate and refine. And you know, these are just basically like the basic first steps into like interoperability. So.
Sure. And how do I pronounce your first name? Is it Salaboy? Oh, sorry.
Right. My first name is Mauricio.
Okay.
Yeah, easier.
And the other one is a nickname.
It's just a nickname, yeah. From when I used to play Counter-Strike when I was a kid.
Got it. Okay.
So, hey, Matthias.
Hello.
Matthias.
I'm not entirely sure who else is joining. I think that Viva is also joining. He was really interested in working on the Tecton side with Andrea. So maybe we just need to wait a couple of minutes more. Jürgen, just for you to know, I mean, we try to keep these kind of like meetings as short as possible. This is more like a sync to make sure that we tackle all the, you know, all the things that are happening, and just to move things forward. In general, it's just a sync. It's not a meeting just to have a meeting. And we usually tend to discuss here, like what's going on, what are the next steps, and the things that we talk in a Slack about, like, okay, how do we organize ourselves so we can see some progress? Eric, do you want to give another angle of that? Like, what do we do here, like in these meetings?
No, I absolutely agree. And now the focus is, as Mauricio said, it's on the POC here to see if we can get anything ready for the CDCon, before CDCon, to get to like capitalize on the attention that we will get from there to get more people into this work. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. Yeah, before we focus on the POC, we could sometimes we brought up a couple of discussions from GitHub and focus on that a bit, etc. But now the focus will be on the POC because that's the short-term goals.
Do you know if Emil is joining today? He doesn't seem to be here, which is strange because he's always early.
No, he wasn't joining today.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so then I think that, well, maybe let me ping Viva just to see if he's joining. I think that he was really trying to push some stuff forward as well. So let me see if he joins us. In any case, let me see if I can share the link for the meetings, like the meeting notes, and we can take some notes because the conversation is being recorded. So I think that it should be okay if we also take some meetings and meeting notes and kind of like record what's the plan, what are the action items. Let me add, I think that you can add your names in there. Let me copy. So today is 1st of June, right? Participants. Yep. And yeah, topics here. So one big topic is the POC library PR use case and untitled. Okay, I definitely can share my screen if people want to see. I'm not entirely sure what's going on here in my laptop, but let's see if this works. I need to. I'm in a new laptop, so I might need to close Zoom and enter again. Let me see. Yeah. Let me see. There we go. Yeah. Be back in a second. I need to close Zoom and enter again to be able to share screen.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, hello. Marius is just reconnecting. Yeah, there is.
Sorry about that. I'm back.
Welcome back.
All right. And we have Viva now. Hi, Viva.
Hey, Mauricio.
How are you doing? Sorry for pinging you in Slack, but I think that we wanted to start and it's good to have you here.
I didn't check Slack if you pinged me. So I just came right now.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. Let me share the screen. And unfortunately, Andrea is not here. Andrea is usually more on the Tecton side, and he kind of like also is looking at the pull requests. Eric, I really appreciate your comments, and Viva as well. I can add here the link to the pull request, which should be in the repository. I think that we have that pull request somewhere. And I think that what I wanted to bring into the discussion is what are the next steps to merge this pull request. I appreciate all the comments. I think that I closed most of the comments already. I'm happy to go back again and check. Yeah, I think that I've managed to, okay, so I have Eric comments here.
I only had minor ones.
Good.
Very little. Nothing serious as far as
Yep, so this one is done. And let me add this link into the document. And that's pretty much it. So let me see, go back again. So the idea of this pull request, Jürgen, just for you to know, it's a pretty simple Go library that it's creating the cloud events mapping for the events that we have here in this repository in SIG events. I don't know if you have looked at this repository before. So if you haven't looked at this, basically this is where we are just having the discussions about what are the, I don't know why it's not going to code here, but if I go to code here, inside this directory vocabulary draft, this is where we kind of like trying to define what are the events that we want to focus at the beginning. And if you take a look at, for example, here, we have a bunch of common like continuous integration events, like about builds and test cases and artifacts being packaged and published. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to see if we can have a library that allows us to create these events and to emit these events. And probably what Viva and Andrea is doing. Viva, if you can put kind of like the link of the Tecton controller. I know that there is an issue now where we are discussing that in Tecton, right?
Yes. So there is an issue made for the cloud events controller specifically. And there is a POC which I'm making for emitting CDF events using the controller. So currently we are working using a pipeline run. And if the pipeline run will have like an annotation which says like, okay, this CDF event needs to be sent if whatever happens on this pipeline run. So we are currently working on that. and I have scaffolded the pipeline run controller outside the Tecton pipeline itself, not in the main repo, because it has to go as like an experimental first, and then it will be merged into Tecton. So my next step would be to like include the annotation reading thing. So today I worked on the scaffolding part, and next I would work on that thing. But I'll just share the issue, or actually I'll just add it here 1 second. So
yeah, if you can share it here in the chat, that will be great. So we can add it here, and also if you can share the link of your kind of like your repository where you're working on the controller, that's great as well.
So I will be creating a. So I'll be creating a PR to like the Tecton CD experimental repo, and yeah.
Whenever you have that PR, please put it like there in the Slack so we can all take a look.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
And also,
I'll probably do that tomorrow. Once
You know,
Andrea is back and he can check also.
Yep, definitely. And I'm guessing that from that PR, you're going to be consuming the library, right?
Yes, I'm hoping to.
So that's why I think that we need to discuss when to merge this. Because I think that this is the same that we did. Like, I think that we should kind of try to follow the same approach that we did with the vocabulary kind of like documents. It's like to merge it like quickly with very small content, and then kind of like, you know, keep iterating on it until we get something that works. And we will mark it as draft or something, but at least we can consume it from other projects, like for example, in this case, Tecton. And then we definitely need to figure out what to do on the captain side, right? And again, this is just because we are trying to create a POC. We can definitely go to Jenkins, for example, or to other projects and just pretty much do the same, right? Because we have also the Jenkins, Google Summer of Code student that is working on something pretty similar. So we need to definitely guide them to kind of like follow the same approach that we're following with Tecton and with whatever we do with Captain to listen or consume events. Does that make sense, everyone? Like Eric and Matthias, that's kind of like the conversation, kind of like.
I think it sounds great.
Okay. Okay.
So from what I've seen from the, just briefly, the events that you defined, they are very similar to the events that Captain has internally. So I think that should be really possible to align these events, and probably in the first step, we need to kind of have some small translation service that just translates the events from one implementation to the other implementation.
And I think that maybe Jürgen, that's kind of like what we can work together. So if we have Andrea and Viva working on the Tecton side, we can create this small translation layer at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then we see if Captain is interested in just adopting that internally or whatever. Like we can create an experimental component in the same way that Tecton is doing.
Yeah. I think as a POC, this kind of external or this additional component will be necessary for the POC. But in the long run, we should think about how to kind of merge the specifications and come up with one specification, as it's also shown in the figure that Eric shared in the Slack, where it's really this CD events.
Perfect. And I think that for me makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's easy to create, and I think that we can just get it done pretty quickly. And if Tecton is kind of like including that into their pipelines, we can just have kind of like an end-to-end thing that we can show pretty quickly. And that's why I think that the next kind of like important conversation that we need to have is like, what's the use case, right? We know that Tecton is running pipelines and they are kind of like annotating their stages or kind of like their tasks into a meeting cloud events. Now, what do we do from the Captain side, right? Like what can we actually do from it? And what kind of events would we need for doing that? And yeah, by looking at the Captain docs, I saw kind of like that you have like the auto remediation kind of thing. And I wonder kind of like what that involves and kind of like how do we trigger that and how do we kind of like configure like the actions here. Let me see. I was looking at kind of like this documentation, which I'm hoping that that's kind of like the one that I should be looking at. for kind of like what do you how do you define a remediation, and then how do you kind of like create actions for them, right?
Yeah. Again, hello from my side. Sorry for
Hi,
being a
Lois.
bit late.
Hello. Yeah.
I was
Hi.
in the CNCF meeting at the same time where I had to present.
No
So
worries.
one of the days where, I think we can do two things. So one of the ideas when we work with pipelining tools, we usually use highly generic pipeline, and Captain very often parameterizes these pipelines. So that's what we do in the shipyard file. To give you an idea, you might have a definition on how to define a production tenant, or you roll it out. But Captain would then tell you which tenant it actually wants to deploy, or how you generally handle the stage, and then Captain will handle which stage to deploy. So for us, a pipeline is actually not a stage. For us, a pipeline, depending on what it's doing, is actually what we consider a task in a sequencing, Captain. It's almost like a bit of inception, but we would do a deployment for us, and we would work with what we call micro pipelines from an idea, more or less. So you dissect pipelines and what they're actually doing, whether it's a test execution, it's a deployment, it's an environment creation, whatever you wanted to do it. And the pipeline itself is only parameterized. And what Captain then would do, Captain, we call it the service, but technically it's exactly this event where we push it, where it supplies all these parameters then to the underlying pipeline. And to your point, we can either do this for a pipeline, for a deployment, for a test, for a promotion. I think one thing that one of the reasons why we built it that way is that we can easily add additional tasks that the original pipeline knows nothing about. I can, for example, add a chaos testing stage, or I can change my promotion mechanism from manual to automatic, or the other way around, depending on what I want to do, based on a quality gate evaluation. And the pipeline code stays completely untouched. So this is handled totally independent of the pipeline.
So let me try to understand that a little bit better. So let's say that we have a pipeline running in Tecton, that it's emitting some events, right? Like it's a building pipeline, it's building a set of artifacts, including, let's say, a Docker container. And like that's my question is more about that. Like, should we focus on building pipelines or on deployment pipelines? Maybe we can just create a deployment pipeline and then just decorate that with Captain, right? Like add more stuff on top of it.
Yeah, so we're not building anything. I mean, technically you could do it with a custom sequence, but the idea is usually we get a new artifact event, like something new is here to deploy or create or whatever.
Okay.
Then usually this event moves into Captain. Captain then looks at what we have in the shipyard file, which is the strategy more or less how this specific application or service should be deployed. It's usually based on a per project basis. And then Captain picks and chooses what it wants to do with this specific application. Obviously might be different from an application, from an application component to a database to maybe an iOS application, whatever it is. And then based on the sequence, what we call a sequence, what is defined, it will then call other services, which again can be pipelines.
Okay.
So we would have to build pipeline, calling Captain looking up what should I actually do with the specific artifact also right now. Like one example we're using here, assume you're an e-commerce provider. So throughout the year, you're encourage people to do fast experimentation. But during Black Friday and Cyber Monday, you're not encouraging people to do experimentation because you're making 60% of your revenue. That's not the best time of the year to try out that new card application that might fail. So you might switch this around in Captain, or you add an additional security test policy. One of the areas is also, especially if you look into the finance and healthcare environments, they kind of need to ensure that the delivery workflows follow a certain practice, and they don't want to have everything encoded and still want to give people freedom. So that sequence would be encoded in Captain, what needs to happen, and then people still have the freedom to kind of do the individual steps. So we build it, send it to Captain. Captain picks what it wants to do, whether it's test, deploy, validate the validation and SLI pieces you have in there in Captain. This again would be calls to different smaller Tecton pipelines again. We would just define the order of what we want to do, because for certain stages we might want to call a performance test, for others we want to call a security test, for others we run a performance test and a chaos test at the same time. Again, this is all something I don't need to encode in the pipeline. this is dependent on maybe some policy. So that's one way. It's more or less a back and forth communication between the two.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think that
micro pipelines, that's what I like to call them, like shivering microservices with micro pipelines that you then orchestrate, and more or less Captain is acting as the mesh in here that kind of links the things properly together.
perfect.
But also to your earlier point, the pipeline for us is also a service. So when we do the remediation, we can also call a pipeline. So assume that we want to scale something up or change an environment configuration based on the problem. We again would emit this event where we have a specific, this can again trigger a tactile pipeline if it's running there as well.
I think that makes sense. So basically, at that point, when you kind of like run a deploy pipeline, what's kind of like the event in Captain that needs to be emitted to say something was deployed? Like new service or something like that?
New artifact event right now.
And what happens when you have like a new Docker image? How is that different, or is it the same?
It's the same.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah.
So this one is like this is okay, new Docker image, let's say, or new Helm thing, whatever. And here, like when you deploy things, it's just like you have another artifact, which is probably a new service running.
Yeah, and then Captain will like which environment should I start to deploy the thing to, then triggers the proper execution. Usually we always run quality gates, so we validate against SLIs and SLOs.
Yep.
This again is something you don't need to include in your pipeline. This is like a built-in functionality. And if
Perfect.
it works, if it gets automatically promoted, it will then trigger again, for example, a deployment pipeline, but this time give it a different target because it knows if it works in this environment, we push it to the next one.
For that, like for environments, you have as well like events there, like what are kind of like the environment events? Like every time that you create an event, do you need to notify Captain that there's a new event available, like a new environment available?
No, we would send it to the pipeline. We would tell you, for example, first time I want service A being deployed to dev. It's like part of the metadata of the event. Then the next event you would get, I want to have service A being deployed to say to pre-production. And there's other metadata, like we would send you which type of deployment we want to use. Please blue-green deploy it for me. Please direct deploy it for me.
Okay, so I think that that's super helpful. So in general, what Captain is doing is basically parameterizing these micro pipelines and defining which one to call.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And now I think that that's why I need Jürgen to help me out to set up kind of like something pretty simple around this, right? So we can definitely assume that we will have some tecton pipelines that are going to build stuff and then going to deploy stuff. And then we build this component that says, every time that we send like a new artifact event from the CDF events, we are going to emit the one that is from Captain, and then we are going to see how the pipelines are triggered. If I can set that up, that will be awesome.
Yeah, and then we can in between, like you already have here, which environment should I deploy this? Then we could also make use of the Captain quality gate. There can be like the next step. In the first step, we maybe kind of like do not do the quality gates, but just have a multi-stage environment. And then as a subsequent step, we can add the quality gates. And this should not change anything on the tecton side. So that's also the pretty part here.
Yeah, the nice thing about this demo would be you, for example, add a stage in Captain, and you don't touch any pipelines. It's just parameterizing those pipelines differently, and then you see that deployments are running differently, changes are running differently, or you say, well, nobody's running a security check in here. I want to add a security check in here.
Makes sense.
And the advantage is you have, like one of the major arguments when we talk to bigger companies is that you have a real separation of concerns because the SRE or whoever is responsible for the delivery process only owns this delivery process. That's a separate file. Yep. The DevOps engineer owns all those micro pipelines. And then more or less like Lego, they are combined at runtime, but people are only responsible for what they want to do. And the individual developer just says what artifact they want to deploy, but don't have ever access to the other components in there. And that was one of the major drivers, like not all stuffed into one thing together. But yeah, I think the easiest way is to have what I mentioned, the translation service where we translate from a Captain event, which is an SH Captain started event, into a start test event with the proper metadata, which we then send to a Tecton pipeline. We just need to ensure that we get the, that's also, when you remember when we had this discussion, where we said like we need a started, we need a finished event, because this then feeds back into the execution bits and pieces.
Yeah, and I think that that's the main, so there are two main reasons for the POC. One is the CDCon, and the other one is to refine the current events that we have. So we actually make them real, right? With this kind of like iteration of creating a POC, making sure that the events kind of like fit the purpose, and then going back and redefining the events and the properties and making them more concrete. So yeah, so if we can work on these, I'm more than happy. I think that we kind of have something there that we can action, and we can just get it done and then just present and then see what people think about.
Yeah, and then we can have very nice use cases. Like for example, you get the rollback for free. Because if Captain deploys a new version to an environment, sees that it fails, it automatically rolls back to the old version without you having to implement the rollback.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
So and again, what we don't do, I think where Tecton really comes in nicely, we don't have like traditional step-based workflows. It's really the eventing engine that you're getting here. And I think with Jürgen, that's also why I brought him here. He has built lots of our integrations and use cases. So
perfect.
He knows Captain in and out and how to get these things done.
Great. Folks, Eric, Matthias, Viva, any questions?
Yes. So my understanding, or one question first, this new artifact event, would that be sent from the Tecton pipeline, or is that something that Captain sends somehow?
It should be sent from Tecton to Captain to trigger Captain. It's basically the first trigger to Captain. The Captain starts its work. Yeah,
so this actually answers my second question. So we will actually have Tecton triggering Captain through messages and Captain triggering Tecton through messages or events in that case.
Yes.
Yeah. Something like that. I'm not entirely sure if Tecton has that. So basically Tecton, we can build something to do that. I mean, Tecton is not listening for events in that way yet, at least not for our events. So maybe what Viva needs to implement at some point, or we need to have that translation mechanism as well to figure out what pipeline to trigger when we get a Captain event for triggering pipeline.
This is what we talked about last week about some kind of conversion broker or something, or like adapter that we need.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be bi-directional for now.
Yeah,
so
this was also very important because we don't want to build a CI system. That's definitely not what we want to do. We don't want to build anything that already exists, but this event orchestrator does not exist, and that's why the focus was there.
Perfect.
So this might be part of the another POC that I made last week, which isn't completed because the CDF events library is still kind of yet to be done. But this might be part of the POC I built last week for like the conversion broker. We can discuss more on how that would work.
Yeah, I think that in that sense, Viva, I don't want to kind of like add you too much on your plate. I think that if you help and if you work with Andrea on the controller on the Tecton side, I can take like the initiative with Jürgen on the Captain side for this translation, and then we can see if we can first of all use kind of like your POC, use any other library, and making sure that again we don't not reinvent anything that is already there, like out there, and we can just basically go and use.
No, I was hoping if like the thing that I made before could like help you right now, so you could just pick it up probably, like the thing I made before, or like probably work like ahead on it maybe.
Are the link there? Yeah, are the link like as an example.
Like it's a very crude thing that was made, but it probably could help. Like the idea that it was built around.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. Matthias, Viva, do you have any other specific question about kind of like this kind of like use case and the kind of like the initial steps?
No, but this looks good. I haven't seen Captain as much. I have to still try it out once at least.
Great.
So just to be clear, we will need to either write some small component or add some support in Tecton to actually be possible to trigger through CD events.
I think so, yeah.
Yes. When will we decide specifically how to do that, or more concretely how to do that, whether we build something into Tecton or whether we write some small of event listener that just sends the correct start command to Tecton, or however that would work, just so it doesn't fall between the chairs, so to say?
That's a very good question. And I think that it's all about this kind of like translation component that first is going to basically listen. So basically this one is the one that is going to pick up CD events and create captain events. And as soon as we know how to do that, doing it the other way around shouldn't be that difficult, right? Like making sure that we go and create, for example, pipelines. It shouldn't be that difficult because it's just basically using the Tecton library to trigger to create new pipelines, new pipeline runs. That can be hacked not pretty easily. It might take a week or so, but I think that we can just get it done and then see where do we put these components. I know that the component that is building Viva, it makes a lot of sense to have in Tecton itself, but all the other things like this translation layer, as you know, as Jürgen was saying before, let's keep it out of Captain first to see kind of like how it looks like and how it works, and then we will see where it can live. Maybe in the CDF repository as well, or close to the events.
Yeah.
There is not too many other topics from my side to discuss. I wanted to definitely have a quick chat with Jürgen to kind of like, again, get started with the captain side to see if I can install something or if we can define how to build that component and where, you know, and I do not have any other topics to discuss kind of like in this meeting, because I can definitely see that we are making progress. And I wanted to mention, Eric, I think that you should kind of like send a pull request with the diagram, right? Like definitely if we start getting diagrams in the repository, that will be a good thing to see.
Yes, and on that topic, I would just like to make sure I have answers to my questions. I think I have for most of it. I'll just go through it as I posted in Slack. Yeah, so we will have both way communication now, as we define it. So Tecton stuff will trigger Tecton stuff, and Tecton stuff will trigger Tecton stuff. So I will make sure to add that. I still had, I know transport is the wrong word, but broker, like what broker will be used to actually get these events between Tecton and Captain? Do we have an idea there, or will we just pick something when we're ready for it?
Yep. So my suggestion was to start like with HTTP and probably use the Knative broker if we can use that, or we can use kind of like direct communication, right? Like we can just send, for example, from Tecton, the component that it's generating the CD events can have a sync, which is basically going to be an URL where it's going to be send events via HTTP. There will be a component that will pick up those events and then send another cloud event to another HTTP endpoint in Captain. That can be kind of like possible as well. Kind of like no need for broker, like messaging broker there in the middle. But we can also add like, you know, a Knative broker there, and it should work. It shouldn't be any different.
And that then, if we use a direct HTTP endpoint, presumably, this is a small detail perhaps, but Captain will receive that event as just raw JSON or whatever, and then it will take that raw JSON and go to our event library and say, can you please decode this for me? So it wouldn't use the Go SDK, the Cloud Events Go SDK, to like set up some sort of event receiver and then receive it through there. It's more the Captain would receive it directly and then decode it using the library.
No, that's where the translation kind of like component is, right? So Tecton is sending to a component that has this library and understands. So Tecton has a component that will create CD events, right? And that's going to be sent to another component that it's in the middle, transforming from cloud events using the Go SDK to Captain events. So there is another component that basically has our library plus the Captain library to be able to do the translation. And that component is the one that it's going to send to Captain, already Captain messages. So Captain on its side doesn't need to do any translation.
Right. So as far as Captain is concerned, there is no difference. It doesn't
Exactly. So this diagram, at least in my head, we'll have two more components. One that is closer here to Tecton, that it's basically the one that Viva is creating, which will read annotations and send CD events. And then here closer to Captain, there will be kind of like this translation component that it's receiving CD events using the Go library SDK and sending pure Captain events to Captain.
Right, gotcha. Good.
Yeah, good stuff.
The goal is in the midterm, we would agree all on the same events, and this component will simply more or less go away.
Exactly. That's the whole purpose, just to get rid of all these crazy components and just make sure that the projects kind of like interact natively.
Yeah, I think it just shows greatly how the things can work together.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really nice. And the nice thing that you will get, by the way, as a side effect that Jürgen can then also show you get more or less end-to-end tracing. We're not yet using trace context in there for historic reasons, because we started some of this work, so there's still the Captain context, which is planned to be replaced by trace context.
Good.
But you will see the whole sequence tracing also then in Captain if the proper events are sent. I think it's also a nice side effect.
That's pretty good. Yeah, and I think that's if we can include whatever we can include in the POC, the more to show kind of like visibility wise and all that stuff. That's great. But for now, let's keep it simple, just interaction and see if we can make it work like in a single environment.
Yeah, I think once we get it to the point where you say, oh, hey, there's a new image that I've built, here it is, update your charts, run it, and then you call back to Tecton and deploy it. And then for the next run, we add an additional stage and it gets deployed to that stage as well. I think that's something that people will find really nice without having to touch a pipeline at all and just 5 lines of JSON.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Good stuff. I'm happy we are making progress. That's really good. All right, folks, I think that's pretty much it. Let's keep it short. Let's make sure that we don't kind of like do meetings for having meetings only. So if you guys want to catch up at some point in Slack, feel free to ping me or ping each other, and let's push this forward.
Sounds great.
Maurizio, do you want to stay on this call and sync a little bit on maybe if I can show you how Captain works, or do you want to do this another time?
No, I think that let's do it now. And people, if you want to stay, I mean, I'm happy to do it in this call, and whoever who wants to stay can stay. Basically, the main idea here is just getting started with Captain and trying to discuss this a little bit more in detail.
That sounds like a good idea, Jürgen. Thank you.
Let's do it. Cool. I will stop sharing. So if you want to share.
Yeah, sure. So let me just share. Just a second. So I think you already saw the tutorials and saw a little bit of Captain, but I just make sure to make this full screen here. And what I just want to show you is like how Captain orchestrates all the different tools and how also where Tecton can fit in. So this is one of our public demos. I can also share the link in the chat, so you can also have a look. And what's especially interesting, and I think which will help a lot in our POCs, it's just, for example, the Potato Head. It's a CDF demo project that's just focused on this for the moment. The important part, I think, for our POC and where I want to what I want to highlight is the sequence screen here. So if you go into the Potato Head project into a sequence screen, we can see a whole delivery sequence that was being executed. And what we can also see here, where we can really take a look, and we can use this for debugging or for learning how it's done in Captain, is we can take a look at all the different cloud events that are actually sent from Captain and sent to Captain and sent from Captain. And of course, it's a little bit different for the CD events, but it's also it might also be a bit similar. So this is the complete payload of a cloud event that is sent to Captain, and this is basically the payload that we have to create. This is the event we should create once Tecton does the CI part and let's say comes up with a new image. So this is just the container image and the version. And this is sent to Captain. So Captain knows this is the image that should be deployed, which project, which service, which stage, and then some other information that is just meta information for Captain. And we do have this here, for example, here in our production stage. So that it is deployed to production was actually sent from the hardening stage. So we have a multi-stage delivery pipeline. It starts in our hardening stage. We have a delivery sequence, and the sequence consists of a couple of different tasks. So we have a deployment, a test, an evaluation, a get SLI. But for our purpose, we could, for example, just focus on deployment. We can do a deployment. When the deployment is finished, we go back to Tecton and do another deployment in production, or we can do whatever we want. Whenever we want to add some test here, we just add it in the shipyard file, but we don't have to touch the pipelines in Tecton, for example. And how the tests are triggered, again, it's very similar. We will have all the data on the artifact itself, and the tests are triggered just with a test triggered event. So this is how the events are working. It's always the task and the triggered, and then inside the task, we can see who is actually consuming this event. In this case, it was a JMeter service. This, for example, could be a Tecton service, or we could even send this to Tecton, and Tecton starts and then finishes its work. So this is how we can see how Captain orchestrates the whole delivery sequence. And I think what Alois also mentioned earlier was we have a complete trace on how one artifact goes through the whole system. So we can see that this version was deployed first in hardening. There was this delivery sequence. It was evaluated with 100% of the quality gate. It was then released to the next stage, and the next stage was production. And we can see the whole flow again. So this is one of the public demos we have for Captain, where we can take a look how the events look like, and which events we have to send and which events we can send back from Captain. There are more, but this is just for a delivery sequence for let's say maybe a typical delivery sequence with deployment, tests, evaluation. We can see all the events here.
So you have a single sequence there, right? So that it's called delivery.
Yes.
Okay, can you show us kind of like the definition of that sequence?
Sure. I will go back to the project here. And here it was the Potato Head project, and we can take a look at all the resources that it's managed here by Captain. It's also publicly available. You can also take a look at this. And the shipyard defines all the sequences. And it's very easy. This is the whole definition. So I have in hardening and in production, I have the delivery sequence. In hardening, maybe I can open it up again here, just to kind of to see what was really going on. In hardening, we do have the delivery sequence. I just have one sequence. There could be more sequences, but I just have the delivery sequence here. And it starts with the deployment. The deployment strategy is blue-green on the microservice level. Then I have some tests. I want to execute some performance tests. What's not specified in Captain is which tool is responsible for this. This goes into another concept, which is the Captain uniform, the Captain's uniform. So if you ever want to move from JMeter to Locust or Artillery or K6 or whatever, we don't have to change our process. It's just the tooling we need to change. So we just execute some performance tests, and then we have the evaluation and the release. And all these tasks we can see here, they are also shown here. It's the deployment, the test, evaluation. If you look very closely, we can see the get SLI, which is right now a part of the evaluation, because we need to go to some SLI provider, fetch the data, and then do the evaluation. This is not necessary to be defined in the shipyard, but everything else is a one-to-one mapping. It's basically everything that's happening. And for a subsequent stage, this one, the delivery sequence, will be triggered when a hardening or when a delivery finished event occurs from the hardening stage. And if we want to define some filter here, so this one only is triggered when it's passed. But for, let's say, a rollback sequence, we could just say it should only be triggered when the delivery finished but failed. So the delivery was finished. It was not stuck or anything. It was finished, but the result was a failed result of the quality gate, and we could do something like a rollback or whatever. So this is how we can define and how we can also make a whole flow of different delivery sequences or other sequences, even going through different stages like production or hardening.
That makes a lot of sense. Where like then the tasks defined? What kind of like deployment means? So where do we define what events are going to be sent kind of like in this sequence basically?
So there are a couple of tasks that let's say are reserved keywords in Captain. This can be found in the Captain documentation, but it's basically deployment, test, evaluation, release. What else? Remediation is one. But if you want to write your own, let's say, security scan or something like this, you can define it, and Captain will create an event which has the type, let's say, hardening.security-scan. And whenever we want to start this task, it will be hardening.security-scan.triggered, and whatever tool is responsible for the security scan, let's say it's SNIC, it will answer with a start event, and once the security scan is finished, with a finished event, and then Captain will move on with the next phase. The important part here is that the other tools, they actually do not even know that there was one additional task added. So if you want to do it before test or after test, for the tools, it's completely transparent. They don't need to know. And for the deployment, usually in Captain we can do deployments with Helm, but we could also replace the whole Helm part, for example, with Tecton, and also do deployments with Tecton. Just
which Tecton can be using Helm at the same time, right? Like, so it doesn't really matter what tool do you use, but what I'm interested in here is, okay, by looking at this kind of like sequence, how do so I'm guessing that if these are reserved words, this basically means a set of events that it's going to be emitted somewhere, right? And how do we configure that? Like, where are those events going to be emitted, and how do we integrate there? With our stuff.
Yeah. So all the events, we do have a specification of all the events.
Yeah, I think that we have seen that before. Yeah.
So these are all the events, but as said, like if you add some
Jürgen, I think if we show the subscriptions, that might be helpful. So a service, which in your case would be a task or a pipeline, actually subscribes to an event with parameters. That's what the uniform more or less is.
Okay, great. So basically, definitely, yeah, we will need to create a uniform.
So for example, we can take a look at a simple service that is how the subscription mechanism is working. So we do have templates for this, but just to see, like here we can see for which events, this integration is listening for. It's the Litmus integration. It's starting chaos tests, and it's listening for test.triggered or also test.finished, because in a .finished event, if it comes from some other test integration, we can also stop the chaos. Let's say performance tests are finished, and we will receive this event in the Litmus integration, and we say, okay, performance tests are already finished. We can also stop now chaos because it's not needed anymore. But here we can define it. Captain sends this to, we're using here as the messaging system, we're using here Nets, and you can just subscribe to this and listen for these kind of events.
Yep, perfect. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, so yeah, in general, I think that I do understand the idea. We will need to build. So basically, what we will need to do is we will need to create kind of like a repository with the shipyard definition for the sequence that we want to have, like a pretty simple sequence. then we will need to go into a Captain installation and basically import that project, or do you kind of like add that project to Captain? How do you do that?
You add the project to Captain. So it's the as I showed you, the potato head. You don't add the source code or whatever to Captain, but you add the project and only meta information, not meta information, but the help chart, the test files, remediation instruction. This is what you add to Captain. It's basically the all the information that's needed for deployment, but not the source code itself.
Okay, good. So we will. So basically, we create that. We have a. So that's the next question. So should we work with like something like this, like a public Captain instance for the POC, or should we kind of like try to kind of like install a setup where we can have Tecton and Captain all working kind of like locally?
I think for the POC, coming up with our own installation where we can really mess around, I think would make more sense. If we want to like exchange some tools or exchange some components and also do some debugging there. Perfect.
Yeah, so definitely. So if we can basically then have like a very minimal, because in order to run these projects, these definitions, these kind of like sequences, we need to have basically what like the control plane for Captain, right?
Yes.
As soon as we have the control plane, then we can just basically create these services and subscribe to events that Captain is emitting, right?
Yes, we would need to install Captain, create a project, and create one service. The project is the is a logical representation of one or more microservices that we can add. So there has to be at least one service that we add to a project, and then we can already invoke a first sequence.
Sounds good. And you mentioned that you're working on something for Minikube that I can probably run on Kind as well, right?
Yeah, I'm working on a quick start guide on K3D.
Okay.
And this makes it really easy to run Captain also locally. Kind might also work. It was just not working on my machine because Kind needs a little bit more resources than K3D. But I can share the same installation instructions and probably
I can give it a try. Yep, I can give it a try and see if I can get it working, and then I can start playing around. Then we can start basically defining these kind of like the sequences and how to connect things together. I think that will be great. Yeah.
Very good
stuff. And I think that for the rest of the team, I think that again, like pushing for merging the library so we can start using the library, even if it's buggy or if it's not complete or if it's not covering all the events. But just having the pull request merge, what we can do is we can definitely make reference to that library from other components, something that by having it in a pull request, it's going to be a little bit more tricky. So I think that for the next kind of like SIG events meeting, I think that we should just try to have that discussion and kind of like try to reach a decision on when to merge that. Jürgen, thank you very much for the intro. Is there something else that you want to share from that point?
Jürgen, it might make sense maybe to show a remediation workflow as well, what it looks like. I mean, it's not part of that core use case, but just for completeness and also because Mauricio asked for it.
Yep.
Because it actually works exactly the same. It works exactly. So delivery and operations works exactly in the same way. I think that's why it's good to see it.
Yeah. So let me just find the loading, find the right project for it. So I think I have one in the sock shop and in cards. So again, we have a multi-stage environment here, and I think remediation has defined in production. And I can open, let me just, first open the shipyard file, and then let's have a look in the master. So it's again defining all the delivery sequences and having a look in production. We can even see a rollback sequence. So once if delivery in production is finished but fails, it will be rolled back. And what we also have is
sorry to stop you here, but here you can, for example, see that these are individual sequences. Like every stage has its own sequence, which also allows you to manage them separately. Before we had everything in one, but here you see that actually every stage, or more or less every part of that delivery, has its own sequence. It could be, for example, also a subset of your tenants that you want to model there. Sorry, Jürgen, but I think it's a good idea to share this here.
I feel that's good. So that's kind of like makes me wonder what's happened first here, like delivery and then rollback only if that's triggered by that event, right? And the same with delivery direct, only if the events happen, that sequence is going to be executed.
Yes, exactly. So this is only triggered on a delivery direct if a delivery direct is finished from the staging stage here. This is a way to also model it with different delivery strategies. So I have one service that goes with a blue-green deployment strategy, and I have one service that goes with a direct deployment strategy. And to not kind of, that they are not getting interfered, we can just use two different sequences. The one is called delivery direct, and it only listens for delivery direct finished from the previous stage. So if there might be some services that need a canary rollout and others need blue-green and others need direct, you can simply build it, and you can even have this for, this is the whole file, it's 86 lines of code, and it's for a whole project, and you can even manage now 2 different delivery strategies, and it's not really a large file, so it's still easy to understand.
Yeah, that's really good.
And even with this rollback mechanism here. And what we also have is this the remediation file. And the remediation file is basically triggered when there is a remediation sequence, and the remediation sequence is triggered when there comes an open problem. So if there is a problem or an alert, let's say Prometheus sends an alert, or there's a problem ticket from Dynatrace sent to Captain, it will start the remediation sequence. And here we have, let's say, a response time degradation, and we can map this problem type to a set of actions. So in this case, there is one action that should toggle a feature. We have a human readable name here, what should be done, the description, and then also all the values that will be sent to the action provider. So the action provider will interpret the set of values, what should be done. We can, for other remediations, just to give an example, this could be, the action could be scaling, and the value could be scale up and then like a percentage or a value, or even like a restart, and then with the value maybe a grace period for termination of these kind of things. For all of the feature flags, we have the feature flag in the name and the property, but this is really kind of specific to the use case. But again, here we do not have the tools directly defined, so we could use Unleash or Launch Darkly or Split IO, different feature toggle frameworks, and they would listen for this action, and they would execute this action again by this triggered, started, and finished types of cloud events, so that Captain again knows what's going on and if the remediation is successful. And then once this action is done, Captain can start to do another evaluation with the SLO-based quality gates, and then can probably move on to another action. It can be a sequence of actions, or just close either close the problem ticket, or also escalate if there was no action that could really solve the issue.
Perfect. Yeah, this makes sense. Yeah, this is great. This is great. And the more that we can show, the better, right? Like the more that we can use the tools, the better. So having kind of like an understanding of all these features will help us to, I think, that go faster at some point, like after we go to the stage of kind of like initializing all the components, making sure that they can talk to each other, and then building more and more advanced demos. So yeah, this is great.
Yeah, I think once we have the mapping between the cloud events, we can do a lot of things. It's just that this part that you mentioned also in the diagram, that's the crucial part here.
Great. Any other questions? Matthias, Eric? I don't know if Eric is still around. Nope.
Not for me.
Good. Bebop, any questions?
No, not from my side. I think I'll have to just go ahead and try it out.
Yep. Yeah. We will be doing that, and I will definitely be trying to document that for running Tecton, and also Captain in probably in kind. Probably I will take a look at K3D as well, just to see how it works. And I mean, if you guys are using that already, I can maybe take a look and see how different it is from kind. It should be pretty similar. That's what I'm expecting. So yeah, great. So Jürgen, let's move to the Slack channel at some point, and let's try to move these things forward. If you can share that kind of like tutorial that you mentioned, I will give it a try.
Yeah, sure. Happy
Great.
to share.
Thank you everyone else from joining, and let's meet again on the SIG events meeting. I think that's happening Monday. So let's talk there and try to define the next steps. But in the meantime, I will be pushing the library and the events, and Bebop keep us posted about like the Tecton side as well in Slack.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you, Jürgen. Thank you
Really exciting.
for joining.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Take care.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
everyone.